All right. Okay, so welcome to Growing Maricopa. Today we are going to be discussing pollinators in our school gardens and how using pollinators in our lessons is an easy way to start introducing agricultural concepts to our students. And if I seem distracted ever, it's as people are joining the call, I am letting them in, making sure we are all here. Okay, so as we wait and before we jump into everything, if you could actually answer these few questions that are on the slide in the chat for me, that would be great. So if you could put your name, your school district, the amount of students that you teach annually, and also maybe why you're attending this webinar. We'll just answer this for about a minute or so as we wait for everyone else to join us. Perfect. Thank you, Allison. Hi, Stephanie. Awesome. Here all the answers come in at once. Very cool, Amy. Thank you for sharing, Angela and Emily. Okay. So thank you all, for sharing. If you're still finishing up, go ahead and continue to put that in the chat. So again, thank you for introducing yourselves. Hopefully that helps. It helps me get to know who's in the room and who's attending, and also hopefully it's helpful for you all to see who's here and maybe who you have things in common with and who you want to connect with. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the program and the goal of the program. I know we have some new folks here joining us tonight. So again, this is the Growing Maricopa program. And the goal of this program is really to help you make agricultural connections in your school garden. If you have one, maybe help you start one if you want one, and really help connect those to our academic standards. So we meet once a month. That's the plan. We meet via Zoom typically, except for we will have quarterly in-person meetings. So those in-person meetings really are going to be a tour of another school garden or a farm in the Phoenix area. There'll be different hands-on activities, and you'll get usually extra resources when you attend those. But going back into what are some of the things, why should you be here? Hopefully the goal is that these sessions will help you build a robust school garden or agricultural program. And then we're also going to give you a lot of free stuff. So you'll get free textbooks. For those of you that have been coming to these calls, you've already received some of these books. Hopefully those have been helpful. But you keep, tuning into these sessions, you'll get more of those books. In the future, we're hoping to hand out seeds as well, and some other resources will be coming your way. And then also there are free site visits offered. So this is optional. You do not need to do this, but if you want somebody to come check out your school garden or check out, where you're thinking about having a school garden, I am more than happy to come out. Especially if you're in the Phoenix area or outside of the Phoenix area, Maricopa County especially, and you need some help, you need somebody to come look at what you have, feel free to email me. And if I don't know the answer, I know somebody that does, and I will, make sure you get the information that you need to have a successful school garden. Okay, and then here's just real quick the outline of topics that we will be covering. So for those of you that were here with us last month, we met at the extension farm and had a tour. There was food as well. Hopefully I recognize some of the names from that night. So hopefully that was enjoyable for everyone. Tonight, obviously, we're talking about pollinator gardens, and then you can see next month, we'll be talking about, starting a school garden committee and different things that you can do to help support kind of labor-wise your school garden, because, and I saw in the chat, some people, want to get your school garden started again. So creating ways and protocols that hopefully will keep that from happening. Okay, so the fun part, right? These are the two books that you'll be receiving for free, just for showing up and participating in the webinar. So the address that you use when you registered, that is the address I will be sending these books to. So if you had to change an address, it's not the address you want things being mailed to, whatever that, if there's a change, or maybe you didn't give me your address, whatever it is, if you want these books, I need your mailing address. So get that to me or correct that as soon as possible. As a caveat for this, you will need to stay. I mean, maybe there's some exceptions, but you will need to stay for the whole webinar to get these books. It's not intended for somebody to just jump in, sit for the first 5 minutes, jump off and get the book. So we really are encouraging you to stay for the webinar to get them. And then also, if you've already joined any of our sessions, you won't be getting the school garden curriculum. That's just for the new participants that are joining each time, but you will be getting the honeybee book that you see there, as the same for any future books for any of the future sessions. Okay, so before we jump into our formal content, I want you all to look at the crops that are pictured on the screen right now. So all of these crops have something in common, and I would like you to think about, looking at those different crops, think about what it is that they all have in common. And if there's any guesses, you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. And throughout the whole thing, if you ever want to just unmute yourself and say something, please do. It's nice to have that interaction. All right, Bethany, I see you. Yeah, it should be, I mean, hopefully it's kind of obvious. That's why we're here, right? We're talking about pollination and why that's important in agriculture. So absolutely, all of these crops require pollination. So what does that mean? If they need pollination, what does that mean? That means that if they don't receive pollination, they won't be able to produce any fruit, right? So, we wouldn't be able to have any cucumbers. We wouldn't have almonds or any of those almond byproducts. No almond milk, almond butter, all of that jazz. No strawberries, no agave or no tequila. No more sugarcane, which is in so much of what we eat now, and no onions. And this is by no means the extent of the list. Yeah, it does kind of look like that, like lemongrass. But this is not an exhaustive list, right? There are so many different crops, and we'll get into that need pollination in order to produce. This was just 6 that I saw that I was like, oh, I'll put that on the slide, but there are many more that require pollination. Okay, so today we are going to discuss the importance of pollinators in agricultural production. And as we just kind of looked at in that first opening slide, that many of the foods we know and love, we wouldn't have today if we didn't have pollinators. It's actually estimated that 1 in every 3 bites of food that we consume, we have due to pollinators. So that's a big chunk of food there, right? And then as a side note, the pollinators that we see in agriculture, so just to make that connection for you, in your school gardens, it's going to be a lot of the same pollinators that we're looking at in agriculture that is going to be found in your community garden or your school garden, because it's not like the pollinators are going to be like, oh, can't go there, that's the school garden. It's going to be a lot of the same overlap. So teaching the students about the pollinators that you see in your school gardens or just around your classrooms or wherever you're at is a great and easy way to start talking about agricultural principles and bringing those into your classrooms. And you could do this even without having a school garden. And April, I saw your comment. It's a good guess. I like the different guesses. Okay, so first, what is a pollinator? So the technical definition of a pollinator is that it's an insect or another form or agent that conveys pollen to a plant and so allows fertilization. So we're going to take a moment to think about what kind of pollinators you have seen in your garden or maybe in farms that you've visited. And we're going to do this with a quick visualization exercise. So and some of the workshops that I do and the different programs that I run, we like to start our lessons with these kinds of activities, these kinds of visualization activities, because they can be fun ways to help your students, whoever they are, whatever age they are. It really works for a broad range of ages and people that you're trying to reach, but it helps them ground down and connect with where they're at before you start your session. So we're going to practice one of those, just you can kind of see if it's something that you would want to do in one of your own classes and maybe start some of your lessons like that. So I would like you all to start by closing your eyes. And imagine the noises that you hear. Imagine the kinds of things that you might be smelling, the different aromas that are coming up to you, the different sensations that you're feeling. Maybe you feel a cool breeze, a little breezy out right now. Maybe you feel the warm sun on your skin. So now I want you to start focusing on, in whatever garden you're at, start focusing in on what flowers and blooms you might see in your garden, what's around you. And these blooms could be any size and from any kind of plant. Just really imagining and visualizing what that garden looks like around you. And now start thinking about if there's any pollinators visiting these blooms. And whatever pollinators are coming to mind, that's fine. So imagine all the different kinds of pollinators that you know, maybe that you've seen before, that are coming into your garden right now. Okay, so now let's come back. Thank you for indulging in that activity with me. And just share with us, again, either unmute yourself, feel free, or in the chat, what kind of pollinators did you see? What ones first came to mind when you thought through this exercise? Bees, yes, bees. Bees, butterflies, monarch, and moths, awesome. Hummingbirds. Anything else? Any other pollinators maybe you didn't immediately visualize, but you know of? Ants, yes. Lacewings, absolutely. Beetles. Bats, yes. Okay. So here are some broad categories of pollinator types that we might see. You named a lot of them. But I mean, these are, like I said, we're not going like somebody said lacewings, Loretta said lacewings. We're not going into those specific species, but I just wanted to, here are the broad categories, right, of all the different kinds. And so you can also see wind and water are on there. So they're not an animal, but they are still performing some of the tasks that a pollinator would do. And so really any of these, I mean, you could break this list out of pollinators into a whole series of lessons, right? That you could pick a pollinator, whether it's an individual or a kind of pollinator, and then talk about, well, okay, what are all the agricultural crops that this pollinator touches? What foods do we have to thank a bird for, type of thing. And that could just be a really quick, easy way to start talking about agriculture, even without a school garden in your class. Because if you have, landscaping plants or anything, they'll see bees, they'll see birds, right? Okay, so now that we've identified and kind of gone through the different kinds of pollinators, the next, stage in this would be to have our talk with our students about the different ones they might see in their gardens or farms, and then start talking to them about and working with them through what is the pollination process? How does it actually work? And why is it important to agriculture? So help them to start making those connections and thinking through, why are there even pollinators visiting the garden in the first place? So now for the next few slides, we're going to talk about a few hands-on activity approaches that we've used with students to discuss pollinators and how that pollination process occurs. And my goal was sharing these different approaches, so they're all kind of the same activity with same end goal, but a lot of different approaches. And my hope with that is that that'll either, oh, I like that approach, or it'll help you like spark an idea for something that's more suited for your context, right? Okay, so as I said, all the approaches I'm about to go through really are trying to reach that same end goal. They just go about it in different ways. So the first one that I have, and this is all about, again, teaching our students what the pollination process is and why do we have pollinators in our garden in the first place. So the first one I have is you have students explore the area around them and look for blooms and take pictures of their selected flower. If you're working with younger children and maybe they don't have a cell phone yet, or you don't really want them with a camera yet, you could have your students draw pictures of the flowers or identify the colors of the flowers or whatever that looks like to you. You can give them a pollinator journal and have them observe the different flowers that they see. Another side activity you could do with some of these is have your students, especially if they're younger, pretend that they are a pollinator and travel to as many different flowers and blooms as they can. And that way they're counting how many different blooms they see, or you could have them measure, right, the different distances from bloom to bloom. And that way you can help them put into perspective how far pollinators have to travel, both to get their own food and how far they travel to help us get our food. And then a second one is to have your students forage for a flower. So especially if you've already identified an area of, these are, first of all, there's no poison plants here. It's safe for students to be here. And then they can go pick whatever flower that they find. And so they can bring that flower back, or they could tape it to a piece of paper and then just bring it back with them to examine later. And obviously the pollinator distance activity would count in this as well. All right, so another approach, if you don't have, a bunch of space or a garden, or you don't really want your students harvesting any of the flowers that you have around, you can always purchase flowers from a shop, or maybe you have flowers in your own garden, whatever that is. You can bring pre-selected flowers to the class, and you can pass those out or have your students pick them and have them examine them within your classroom. And then if you don't have any access to actual flowers, the physical flowers, you can always pass out pictures of a flower, or maybe you have a book that has flowers in it, just something that they can visualize and see, especially when it's, in this picture on the screen, that it's zoomed in and they can see all the different parts of it. So when the students have finished either, any of these approaches, whether they're drawing, they're foraging, whatever it is, you can have the students come back together and then have them share, okay, what kinds of things about their flower did they notice? And again, this is all you're building up on, what is the structure of a flower? Why is that important? Why is a pollinator coming? And we've done it where we've had them talk about, okay, well, what different things of the flower that you have, whether it's the picture or the one that they're holding, whatever, what things stick out to you? What parts of the flower do you notice? And you can draw and build the flower with them as they're describing it to you. Another thing that we've done or that I've seen as well in other programs is if you're having your students use a physical flower, so again, they've foraged it or you have brought the flower to them, you can have them dissect that flower. So the image here is a chart from the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University. We've used similar ones to this. So you can, and it's important to share a flower anatomy so they can see and identify, okay, what parts in this physical flower that I'm holding match up with this picture. And also depending on ages of the students that you're working with, you could always pre-cut some of the flowers for them so they can see, right, if you don't want your students with a razor blade or anything like that. But yeah, giving them the opportunity to really like pull apart that physical flower that they have, either that they foraged and saw in a field or that you brought to them, can help them really make those connections. And again, for any of these activities, whether they're actually physically dissecting it or just looking at the pictures, it is important to discuss the anatomy of the flower because it will help them understand and make those further connections for the pollination process. Okay, so once you've discussed the flower anatomy, you can move on, like we've been talking about, to the pollinator process. So diagrams like this one on the screen are useful to share because they make those really, useful visual connections. So discussing how parts of the flower are specifically designed for pollinators, right? So the pollen that's on the stamen, that will stick to a pollinator's body when they are collecting nectar. And then when that pollinator goes to a different flower in search of more food, then, when they land, that pollen that's on their body, that will rub off into the stigma of the next plant and so on, right? We know this process. It's all part of a very intentional design. So this could be a good idea and a good point for you to start discussing interdependent relationships or symbiotic relationships, right? The flowers and the pollinators rely on each other. They've formed that interdependent relationship. They rely on each other to function fully, to survive. Just really bringing home how crucial it is for those pollinators and how we need that in order for us to, we have that interdependent relationship with them as well, because if we're going to have that food, just these big connections that you can make with your students in really, simple but profound ways. Okay, so we've covered the flower anatomy. I know like all of us probably have seen that before, but I just wanted to, again, show the different ways, how simple it is that we can start really connecting things to agriculture. So we've discussed the pollination process. Now it's time to make those connections to agriculture. So this is when we can really bring home, again, as we've been talking about, how important pollinators are in crop production and how some of the fruits, vegetables, and fiber that we have and we use daily, we only have because of pollination. Okay, so I wanted to share some of these facts on pollinators in agriculture. So it's estimated that we talked about this in the beginning, estimated that 1 in every 3 bites of food we have is due to pollinators. And somewhere between 75% and 95% of all flowering plants on Earth need help with pollination. So they need those pollinators, whether it's the animals or human pollinated, wind, water, they need those pollinators. The pollinators provide pollination services to over 180,000 different plant species and more than 1,200 crops. So this means, like we said earlier, that 1 out of every 3 bites of food is there because of pollinators. If we want to look at the pollinators' economic impact, right? So if your students are interested in ag economics, April, I see your comment. I would absolutely include humans on a pollinator list. There's some crops, flowers, ornamental flowers that we have that they are human pollinated. Or if you're walking through a field and you get something on your pant leg, whatever, right? We move stuff around. Good question. So to the point of the economic impacts, so if you're talking about agricultural economics, if your students are interested in that, or if you're interested in that, pollinators add $217 billion to the global economy. And honeybees alone add $1.2 to $5.4 billion in agricultural productivity in the United States. So it's a lot of economic lessons that you could put in here, right? And make those connections, especially for your older students. And just sharing the sheer amount of plants and crops that rely on pollination is really incredible to convey to your students. Okay. So what do we think? Any thoughts or comments on the video? Anything shocking or surprising?
I don't know about shocking, but I've been doing Journey to 2050 with my sixth graders, and we're on the part right now about food waste. And so we watched a couple of videos about ugly fruits and have been talking about how like the grocery store in France that has started a nationwide movement to make ugly fruits, ugly plants, vegetables available for 30% lower cost.
Oh, cool.
And then they mentioned there about the curvy cucumbers. Like, why are we so picky?
I know.
Why are we like that?
I know. And I know there's like co-ops and what is it, imperfect produce that are out there. Let me get the screen back up. Any other comments? Okay. Okay. So I also wanted to share this free resource. I think this actually just came out. I just saw it this morning. So this is through the Kids Gardening organization, and they are a really cool organization if you haven't looked into them already. But this is the link. They have a free guide to sustainable gardening with kids. They talk about, in this one, they talk about how planting a pollinator garden will help you provide food, water, and shelter for pollinators. They have a whole section on planting a pollinator garden and including extra pollinator garden activity ideas. So they mentioned things like keeping a pollinator journal or hosting a pollinator scavenger hunt. They talk about creating pollinator seed balls and making a pollinator hotel, which pollinator hotels is a really fun activity if you haven't done that. And that's fun for all ages, actually. Okay, so I wanted to real quick in the rest of our time just kind of go over, and these are things from that guide. If you're interested in a pollinator garden, some things that you can do. So pollinator gardens are great because they can be worked into, we talked about this a little bit earlier, they can be worked into landscaping of your school. So versus, a school garden, sometimes you think, or we need or want to have a whole section dedicated to this, whereas this can really be, our landscaping plants that we use and we focus on. But wherever you're doing it, making sure that you are selecting an appropriate site. So if you're putting in a new one, talking about the types of gardens, so you can have a pollinator garden in containers, so different pots, raised beds, or in-ground beds. And the guide emphasizes, dream big, but start small, and you can always add stuff to it as you go. And then thinking about your light levels. So most pollinator gardens are going to prefer to have that full to partial sun. So if there's a spot that you can have that in, that would be great. And making sure that your soil moisture is well drained. And I am going to share in the chat a link to a video from our first session in November. And this session really just talked about the basics of starting a school garden and all the things you might want to consider in implementing that. So I just dropped that link in the chat if anyone is interested in that. Okay, so once you have your site, if you don't already have plants, it's time to start thinking about the kinds of plants that you want, right? So it's important to have plants that will flower throughout the seasons. So that doesn't mean the same plant is continuously flowering, but meaning having a mix of variety of plants that are going to bloom throughout the year in the different growing seasons. So there's things like your aromatic herbs, different annuals, perennials, woody plants, ornamental grasses, and they in the guide have a list of different things that you might want to look into. And they also have a pre-planned garden listed in the guide. They have 2 that they've listed that have been developed by horticulturalists that have chosen appropriate plants, and they've even created the planting plan for you, where to space things and all of that. However, keep in mind that our pollinator gardens might look a little different, right? Because the different climate that we have. I don't know if you can hear the ice cream truck driving by right now, but that's happening. But anyway, yeah, just keep in mind that our pollinator gardens might look a little different than the ones that have been pre-planned. And then just important to remember as we're planning to have those diverse plantings. So having a variety of plants in your garden will lessen any severe pest problems you might have, as well as attract the pest natural enemies, including any predatory insects and birds. Okay, so we are going to switch gears just a little bit. We are coming towards the end of our session, but I just would like to open up some space for you all to share about, what types of things have you incorporated? So I know that there are people in this meeting that I've talked to. I know you're doing things. So if you are comfortable and you would like to share, please do. You can either unmute or you can type it in the chat. There's no pressure, but this is just a fun way to talk about and share ideas on how you teach ag, how you incorporate pollinators, and that sort of thing. Any volunteers?
I'll share. Wasn't really thinking about it being, I'll turn my video on too. Being about pollinators, but back in October or November, the district science person contacted me and said that they have butterfly larvae. And so they sent me so many butterflies. Like there were hundreds, because they just had this larva and they had nothing to do with it, and they were looking for someone who would take it. And so it came, and they were already about an inch long. So we only had them a few days before they went into chrysalis. And then we set them free in the garden. So it was fun and exciting. I wasn't really thinking, I didn't do like a pollinator lesson or anything. We just learned about the caterpillars and butterflies. But now, if I can do it again, I would definitely incorporate more of this stuff, because it's actually related. I mean, I guess the butterflies were related too, but
yeah,
it was very haphazard and just sure, I'll take them. Never done this before, but yeah, I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure they'll remember that. That's really cool.
We seriously had several hundred butterflies.
Wow.
It was a lot.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Loretta with Phoenix International Academy. Um, one, a couple of ways that I've incorporated pollinator lessons into my garden and classroom. We've done a lot of structure and function with different pollinators like bees and butterflies. I teach first grade, so I do lots of craftivities with them as well. We planted um, edible flowers, which we can eat, and also the pollinators can have and enjoy in the garden. We planted that pollinator garden, I think, a couple of months ago, which is flourishing now. So the students are able to see um, butterflies and ladybugs and bees every day in the garden that we go out. I also try to teach ag lessons in a multidisciplinary approach where um, just a couple of weeks ago, we did a project-based learning on pollinators, but specifically on butterflies. So we did get caterpillars and butterfly larvae in the classroom, and the students were able to watch them develop, and then we released them in the garden. But other than that, we were able to study art, like symmetry with the butterfly's wings, and we're able to study dance with how bees are able to communicate through dance, and just looking at it through science, through art, through any social emotional lens. Um, were ways that I've kind of connected pollinator lessons in my classroom.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of good things there. Lots of things popping up in the chat as well. So if you're not reading that, you should definitely check it out. I love somebody put, and Loretta, actually, you might be able to talk on this a little bit, but Francis said that they would like to do how to behave around pollinators with preschoolers. That reminded me of what you talked about when I came to your school.
Oh, yes, that takes a lot of time, I believe. Through some ways that I've taught my students how to be more calm around bees, just educating them on their behavior, on understanding what their purpose is in the garden. They're not there to hurt us or sting us in any way, but yeah, I would say through videos, even through movies, through short clips, and being able to kind of have those discussions with your students. But I could see it does take time.
Yeah, super fun. And then they get excited about it, which is nice. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for sharing. It always adds so much to the class when everyone puts in their ideas and things that they've done, because there's so much wisdom, knowledge, and experience in these groups because you all have done so much on your own. I think everyone gets so much out of when you share those experiences. But as always, I have a survey for us to fill out. I know everyone that comes to my program is probably sick and tired of me always talking about that, but it really does help. It helps me figure out, and those that I'm working with, what are some things that you want to see? Is there something that we did that you didn't like? Is there something that you would like to see different in the future? Because really, like these classes, these webinars, they exist for you. So if there's something that you're not getting out of it that you want to get out of it, let me know. Any and all feedback, even if it's negative, right? Any of it, we want it all. So please, 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 please fill out that survey for me. That would be great. Yes, April. The presentation, I am recording it. So those of you that spoke, so Loretta and April, if you are uncomfortable with anything that you've said being on YouTube, let me know. I can edit out that part of the presentation, but I will be uploading. Thanks for that, Angela. That's so touching. Thank you. But yes, if anyone's uncomfortable with, being on YouTube, I am going to upload this, and I can share the slides as well. Here is my contact information for anyone. And please, again, if you want a site visit, don't hesitate. I will come see your school garden. We can work through some things. And also Angela said, the PD hours, we are able to offer those PD hours through these workshops now. So if you need that, please email me about that and we'll get that set up for you as well. Perfect, Bethany. Go ahead and email me so I don't forget and I can get everyone that needs them those hours. All right. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Taylor.
Yes.
I accidentally got bumped out. Did you send the survey through the chat or
Here, let
is
me
it an email?
repost it real quick so you have the link. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I got it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, I will go ahead and log off. And if anyone needs anything else, go ahead and shoot me an email. Thanks, everyone.